Now, linen is an odd fiber. When you're knitting with it, it's really hard on the hands. It's really inelastic and it just doesn't feel good. Your project is not going to look very good either. Your stitches are going to look awful. Tension's going to look pretty terrible. But let me tell you, it's magical. When you wash it, everything evens out and it has this beautiful drape to it. And the more you wash it, the softer it's going to get. Hey nerdy knitter, Tonia here. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a master hand knitter, and I believe that knitting is a form of self-care, that you can take time for yourself and your creative hobbies, but still create beautiful garments that you love to wear. Part of that, creating those beautiful garments, is choosing the right yarn for that project. Now, we are going to be talking specifically about plant yarns today, or cellulose fiber-based yarns. But there's even more to this topic. Our first Knit and Chat episode was the basics of yarn substitution. So I'm going to link to that down below, because there's some basic things you need to know besides the fiber content when it comes to substituting one yarn for another. Then we've also discussed animal or protein fibers in another past episode, so I'll link to that one as well, because that's sort of a companion to this. There's lots of different fibers and they're basically broken into three groups. Animal or protein fibers from things like sheep or silkworms or llamas and alpacas. And then there are cellulose fibers, or I like to call them plant fibers, because all of the plant material is what is used to make the yarn. There's also synthetic fibers like acrylic or polyester or nylon. We're going to discuss that in the next episode next month. And then there's also biosynthetic yarns, which are basically cellulose or plant fibers that need a more synthetic process to become a usable yarn. Something like bamboo. You can't just hack off a piece of bamboo and start knitting with it. It really needs to be broken down, and it uses a synthetic process to get there. But I am putting that group, the biosynthetics, in with the other cellulose fibers because they all sort of act the same in the end. The process to make the yarn's a little bit different. Cotton's pretty simple. You could probably just pluck some right off the plant and spin it up. But bamboo, of course, is totally different. But in the end, the fibers kind of act the same, even though the source material is very different. And we're just going to cover the broad strokes. There's a lot we could say, like how these yarns are to knit with, how you should care for your finished project, so much more that we could cover. Right now, we're just going to go over like the basic types, or what I think are the most popular ones, and the advantages and disadvantages of knitting with those particular fibers. For all this other information, I have some articles on my website, so I'm going to link to a few of them down below so you can click through and read about any of these fibers that you're interested in learning more about. But it would take a long time to discuss all of them. We could probably do a video for each individual fiber and we'd be here for a long time just talking about all of those things about each of those fibers. But instead of doing that, we're going to go over the broad strokes, and you can find more information linked down below. Now, when I think of plant fibers or cellulose fibers, I immediately think of summer garments because they are perfect for summer garments. They are lightweight and generally breathable, easy to care for, and they work really well for summer tops and tees and tanks. They also work well for kids' garments because they're easy to care for. In general, one fiber or yarn compared to another might have different care instructions, but in general, plant fibers are machine washable and dryable. I also like them for things like household goods, things in the kitchen. Cotton is great for dishcloths and hand towels and things like that, and some other fibers that we're going to get into. Now, the one instance would be anything where it could possibly get set on fire, like things around your stove. It's not great for any knitted items you'd put there because plant material is flammable. So that cotton dishcloth or whatever, if it like hits the element on your stove, would actually, get set on fire, as opposed to like an acrylic, which would melt. Or animal fibers are actually the best for things around your stove because they will self-extinguish, which is pretty cool. But in general, for other sorts of things like dishcloths and things like that, plant fibers are great. But not so much around the stove if you're like worried about something getting caught on fire. Now, the one major drawback for most of these fibers in this whole category is their heaviness. They are heavier than their animal protein fiber counterparts. and they are not as elastic, or they're not elastic at all, I should say. Like wool has that elasticity, other animal fibers have some, except alpaca, of course, but the cellulose fibers, they are not elastic, and that can cause an issue with garments, along with the heaviness of the fiber. Like if you knit a wool sweater and then you knit a sweater in cotton, the cotton sweater is going to weigh a lot more. And because it doesn't have any elasticity, it could start to droop and sag, especially if it is seamless. Now that is one issue I see a lot, is people choosing a plant yarn for a seamless sweater. And it can work if it's like a kid size and it's pretty small, or if it's a small adult size. But the larger that sweater, the more likely it is to droop and sag, or drape if you want to put a positive spin on it, because there is no structure of the shoulder seams. Like you could have side seams, but those don't really provide structure for the whole garment. The side seams can keep the garment from biasing off to the side, which is another issue. But I'm talking like seams at the shoulders for structure. That's what plant fibers need. If you're going to knit a top, you need some seams up here to hold it in place with those, because those fibers are heavier and they are not elastic. So they need something to hold on to help them keep their shape. In general, now there are ways around this. You could look for a yarn that has like a different construction. Like instead of just a regular plied yarn, look for something like a chainette yarn, which is more lightweight than, like, say you had two yarns, one's plied and one is a chainette, and they're both cotton. The chainette's going to have more yardage because it's more lightweight when it's in that chainette construction. And the chainette also provides structure. If you've ever knit a little I-cord, you can see that it stretches and it's got lots of structure, and that chainette yarn is basically a little I-cord, like you're adding structure to those fibers where there was no structure before. So you can get around knitting seamless garments and use plant fibers if you look for a chainette yarn. But in general, you want to be a little more cautious about using plant fibers for seamless sweaters. So when you think of plant fibers, probably the first one you think of is cotton, which is pretty popular. You can find this even in big box stores, Michael's, Walmart, any big box store that sells yarn. You can probably find some yarn like Bernat Handicrafter, which is 100% cotton. But there are also other types of cotton. Now this cotton, this type where you'd find that you'd probably use for things like dishcloths, is a little harder to knit with. It has a more rope-like feel to it in general. This is called upland cotton, this kind of cotton. It accounts for about 95% of the cotton grown in the United States is this kind. I think it's also the kind they use for like jeans, maybe. I'm not sure about that. But it's a sturdier, or at least it's spun up into a sturdier cotton. So if your yarn says 100% cotton, it's probably this kind of upland cotton. Then there is something called Pima cotton. Now I wish you could reach through and feel these two yarns. This is Comfy Sport from Knit Picks. This is actually 75% Pima cotton and then 25% acrylic. So it's got a little acrylic in there too. But when you feel them, you can feel the difference right away. This one is much more soft. This is what I would call a garment cotton. You don't want to knit garments with this kind of cotton, upland cotton, because it's very heavy to begin with, and it's just not that nice for garments, and they're going to droop and sag. They're going to be very, very heavy and not very comfortable. But this kind of cotton, Pima cotton, is the kind you want to look for when you're knitting a summer top with seams, of course. But actually the added acrylic in this would probably give it that elasticity, so it could be used for seamless garments as well. Should have said that at the beginning. Another option for plant fibers is to get it blended with other fibers that have some elasticity, like acrylic. So these are the two common cottons that you will find when it comes to knitting and yarn. You're going to find 100% cotton, which is going to be upland cotton, and then you will see Pima cotton, which is the kind that you want for your summer garments and your accessories. And this kind of cotton, great for house stuff, not great for garments. Pima cotton, good for garments and accessories. There's also Egyptian cotton, which I guess you could find. I haven't seen that in a yarn, but there is Egyptian cotton, which is basically, it's still a Pima cotton. It's just grown specifically along the Nile River. Then there's also Sea Island cotton as well, which you can find in some yarns. You just not going to find it as much as you will these two particular cottons. Now, as far as the advantages for cotton yarn, they are sturdy and durable, especially that upland cotton. They are soft, the Pima cotton specifically, not so much the upland cotton. That's for more sturdy things. And I've read that it's non-allergenic, and I'm not sure if that applies to all plant fibers as well. I wouldn't think so, but I'm guessing people could have allergies to different tree types, which we'll get to because those are plant fibers as well. But cotton specifically, I've read, is non-allergenic. It also absorbs moisture and dries fairly quickly, making it great for household goods like dishcloths and dish towels. It's breathable, it's durable. Breathable, so it's great for summer garments. Durable, so it's great for those kitchen things and for kids' clothes as well. And the last one is they're easy to care for. Depending on the yarn labels are going to have different like care instructions, but a lot of them that I've used have been machine washable and generally dryable as well. So that makes them great for household stuff, makes it great for summer garments where you want to wash them more often than you do, like your wool winter sweaters, and also for kids' garments because, I mean, it's soft yarn and it's easy to care for. So if you're like, try to avoid acrylic yarns and you want something that's still suitable for kids, then cotton yarns could work as well. And I wouldn't be too worried about like a cotton garment stretching out in a small size, like kid sizes. I don't think that's such a big concern. It's just the larger the sweater, the more likely it could be to sag if it doesn't have seams. But in a kid size, I think you probably could get away with that. So a cotton yarn or a lot of other plant fibers would be a good acrylic substitute if you want something that's easy to care for kid garments. Now the disadvantages, like I said at the beginning, these are pretty much the same for all of them. Cotton is pretty heavy, especially when it's compared to wool and other animal fibers. It's not elastic, so it wants to, like the heaviness makes it stretch out, but it won't snap back into place. If you think of like an elastic band, it stretches, snaps back into place. Wool does that. Plant fibers don't really do that. They stretch and stretch because of that heaviness, but they don't snap back into place. The machine washing and drying helps them do that though, so they can get back into shape. But in general, the fibers are heavy and not elastic. Then we have linen. That's the next one. And for that example, I've got some CotLin from Knit Picks. Now this is a blend of cotton, another kind of cotton, Tangus cotton. I didn't research that one, but there's another cotton for you, and some linen. I don't have any 100% linen. So linen is kind of odd. When it's by itself, I have some linen and silk too, which is really nice. But linen is hard to knit with. Like it's hard on the hands because of that inelasticity and that heaviness. So I think that could be applied to a lot of the plant fibers in general, especially like upland cotton. It's hard on the hands to knit with because it's not very elastic. There's not much give to it. And linen is like that as well when you're knitting with it. And also your project is going to look like a mess. It's going to show like every tension problem and it's just going to look terrible. There's nothing wrong with your project or your knitting. It's just the linen yarn. Linen is the problem here. But once that project gets washed, everything evens out. Like it's magic. It just, the more you wash it, the softer it gets, and it just gets softer and drapier and more lovely. But while you're knitting, it's going to look like a mess. That's just something you have to know about linen. But it really is great for summer garments. You get that beautiful drape and they just get softer and just really nice to wear, not so much to knit with. But I like linen blended with other fibers like cotton because it makes it a little easier. It's softer on the hands with that Pima cotton, or in this case, Tangus cotton. I haven't researched that one. I should have done that, but it feels like another softer cotton. Now linen comes from the flax plant, which we also have flax seeds, linseed oil, and linen. So it's a multi-purpose plant. But to turn it into yarn, they have to take this plant, which is like, I've never actually used it in person, but it's really hard stalks or reeds. They have to be like sort of crushed and then soaked in some solution, and it goes through a process to become a fiber. But then once that process is done, it's spun into yarn, and the natural colors can range from like cream to tan, but then it takes dye really well as well. So I love this for summer garments and for shawls, and a blend of cotton and linen that'd probably be fine for kids. This one is machine washable and dryable, this particular one. So you could probably use it for kids' garments, probably be good for household things like towels as well. So lots of good uses, but again, be more cautious with like full length adult size sweaters that don't have any seams because of that heaviness and inelasticity. So the advantages: it's very strong and smooth, it's moisture wicking, and it dries quickly. Non-pilling, it has beautiful drape, especially the more you wash it. Softens with washing, and generally it's machine washable and dryable. Linen usually is washable because you want it to go through that agitation to help it soften and just become its lovely finished product, not how it is when it's on your needles. Now, like cotton, it's inelastic, it's heavy, it's hard to work with, and it wrinkles easily. This one I'm not so sure about. I mean, if you have like a linen, not a hand knit, but like linen cloth, a shirt or a slacks or a skirt or a dress, you'll probably notice that it wrinkles very easily. I don't know if that same thing happens with hand knit garments. I haven't seen that, but I've never knit 100% linen top before to see if that's an issue with knitting or if that's more of an issue with just like woven fabric. Then we have bamboo, and my example here is bamboo pop, which is a blend of 50-50 cotton and bamboo. I don't have any 100% bamboo yarn here. This one, the bamboo though, gives it a really nice little sheen. It's not going to show up very well because this yarn sort of gets blown out, that white yarn. But I have a lovely summer top that I love to wear. It's got really great drape, has seams, but it has this really nice sheen to it, really good drape. I love it. It's one of my favorite summer tops to wear. Can't wear it on video though because the white just goes, sort of explodes, like it just blows out on here. But I have my notes handy here because there are other things with bamboo we want to talk about. First though, I do want to say that bamboo is a great renewable resource because it grows really quickly without fertilizers and pesticides, and it can be harvested without killing the plant. But it does go through that biosynthetic process to become yarn. So it has positives and negatives, I guess, because it takes more of a process, a chemical process, to turn it into yarn. But along with bamboo, we have rayon, modal, tencel, and viscose. Now, these are all biosynthetic fibers, but they're all processed the same way with this synthetic process, but they all come from natural fibers. So I have to keep looking at my notes because I can't keep these straight. But you can see all of those names: rayon, modal, tencel, viscose, or bamboo. They're not interchangeable completely, but they're all processed the same, and they all come from some kind of a wood source for the fiber to be turned into a yarn. But they're all technically, even with their like synthetic sounding names, they're biosynthetic yarns. So first is rayon. So this is a precursor to bamboo. It was first manufactured fiber that comes from a wood pulp. And then bamboo is technically a rayon. It's the same kind of synthetic process, but it's using bamboo instead of like just generic wood pulp. And then there's viscose, which is another form of rayon. This one's derived from beech, pine, spruce, hemlock, eucalyptus, bamboo, soy, or sugarcane. So I have seen yarns that say viscose on them. So you're still getting something that's very similar to bamboo. It won't probably tell you which wood source it came from, but it's a type of rayon, which is, this falls in this same wood-based biosynthetic category. And then there's modal and lyocell. Now, these are types of rayon, but the processing treatment has been improved, so there's less of an environmental impact than the original form of rayon. However, when that was like the 1930s, I think. So modal is derived from beech trees, and lyocell is produced from a variety of wood sources like viscose. So it's like next level viscose. And then there is tencel, which is just the brand name for lyocell rayon. So I know that's a lot. Try to remember all of these terms, but basically they're all forms of rayon, which is just biosynthetic wood-based fibers. Got that? I hope that was understandable. Okay, so advantages for these, and they're all, the advantages and disadvantages are going to be the same generally. I do wonder, I haven't seen any, but because of that biosynthetic process, they can spin it in different ways to get different effects. So you might have more advantages or disadvantages depending on the particular way the yarn is spun. But in general, if it's just spun and plied like a normal yarn, then these advantages and disadvantages apply. So advantages: soft and smooth. I really like bamboo. I mean, I've only used it like mixed with other yarns, but it is very soft. It's very smooth. It has beautiful drape. Some can have a silk-like sheen like this one. It's also hypoallergenic, breathable, lightweight. It takes dye well, and it's fade resistant, strong and durable, and it's generally machine washable and dryable. Of course, check your yarn labels, but in most cases, it is great for washing in the machine and drying. So another great choice for summer garments because of breathable, lightweight, washable, all that. I prefer to wash my summer things a lot more often than I do my winter sweaters. Great for kids' garments. I'm not sure how it would be for like kitchen, like especially like dishcloths or something like that. I'm not sure how it would be for that. I've never tried it, and I'm not quite sure. It doesn't have, oh no, under the disadvantages, I'm reading it right now, it loses strength in water, so probably not great for like household goods that might get wet. And it's also susceptible to mildew. So yeah, definitely don't want to knit a dishcloth with this. Can be slippery to knit with. Yes, it's sort of like silk like that as well, where you got that really slick, smooth fiber. So it can be a bit slippery. And also, depending on what other fibers it's been blended with. A tendency to lose shape and stretch, and it's inelastic. So like other plant fibers, they're all pretty much going to have that in common. They're going to lose their shape because they're inelastic, and they're also pretty heavy. Now, another less common plant or cellulose fiber is hemp. You can find them in yarns. They're not quite as common as cotton or linen or bamboo or viscose or rayon, but you can find hemp. Now, this particular one I think is discontinued. This was Patons Hempster. It's a blend of cotton and hemp, and it feels very much like a dishcloth cotton mixed with a linen. So not so great to knit with. It's really hard on the hands as you're knitting with it. But so definitely not, at least this particular hemp yarn would not be one I would use for a garment. I actually did knit a garment with this, just a summer tank with seams, but it's pretty heavy. Like it's just heavy yarn. So it's more for things probably like market bags and maybe dishcloths. I have to see what I wrote about advantages and disadvantages here for that, but not as common. But it does have a long history in the textile world, dating as far back as 800 BC in Asia, where hemp fabric was used for fabric, rope, twine, sandals, shoes, and even shrouds. And also interesting note was it was also used for paper. The Gutenberg Bible used hemp paper, and Thomas Jefferson, he wrote a draft of the Declaration of Independence on hemp paper as well. Oh, and Ben Franklin had a hemp paper making business. So hemp has been around for a long time. We just don't see it a lot when it comes to yarns, but it is out there. And the process for making hemp is very similar to linen yarn. So advantages: strong and durable, good insulator, it's absorbent and mildew resistant. So I'm guessing it would be good for something like a dishcloth. I've got quite a bit of this left over, so I might knit up some dishcloths with it to see. Mildew resistant, non-pilling, it does soften with washing, so it does have that advantage, sort of like linen again, and it absorbs dye well and it resists fading. But like the other plant fibers, can be hard to knit with because it's inelastic. It's also coarse like linen, and it's heavy, can be stiff to work with like linen as well. So something to give a try. If you see a skein somewhere of some like blend with hemp, you can grab a skein. If it's mixed with cotton, then I'm thinking it's probably going to be good for dishcloths. So you could give that a try. So those are like all of the plant fibers. There are probably others that we could discuss with more specialty yarns, but most of the plant fiber yarns you're going to see cotton, linen, bamboo, maybe some hemp, and then you might see rayon, viscose, and some of those other names for basically just forms of rayon. But if you can think of another one, be sure to leave a comment and tell me about that yarn, because I like to learn more about different fibers. So you can find more information about these different fibers linked down below at some articles on my website. And there's also more we could discuss about yarn substitution, the basics of it, or the animal fibers, which, like this video, we went through a bunch of different animal fibers and talked about the advantages and disadvantages. So you might want to check out that video so you can learn more about what it's like to knit with animal or protein fibers. So I'll put the video right here and you can click right there, and I'll see you in the next video.